and welcome to our Leonardo's Horse drawing session here for a homework assignment. I've printed out for you a picture of this horse by Leonardo da Vinci. This is actually a study for a 24-foot bronze sculpture that he worked on making, and he actually made a clay model that was destroyed, and he was never able to actually complete the project, as many of the projects that Leonardo tried to endeavor in his life. But this is a silver point drawing. In the photocopy, this looks like a pencil drawing or chalk, but it's actually a piece of silver that's been dragged across a piece of paper in order to create a drawing. So if you look this up online, it looks kind of blue and fairly muted, but through the magic of photocopying, we're able to have access to it in a way that we can copy with a pencil. We are going to measure this square, which is 7 inches by 7 inches, and we're going to transfer this square onto the piece of paper. The actual drawing I put down here, and you can see that there's another part of a horse and some stray marks. In order to simplify this project and make a box that we can measure off of more simply, I have cropped the image, but given you the full thing down here. We are going to center this on the piece of paper because this is an important skill to be able to measure and center things. And so my paper is a full 12 inches. If your paper is shorter than 12 inches, then divide it in half according to how big it actually is. I'm going to mark the 6-inch mark. And then I'm going to turn my paper and I'm going to measure from the perforation mark. And it's 9 from the perforation mark to the edge. Yours might be different, so measure according to what your paper dimension actually is, but I'm going to mark at the 4.5. Okay. And then I have the actual center of my paper. So I'm going to extend these lines so that I have the center mark. Now, half of 7 is going to be 3.5. So I'm going to put the 3.5 mark of my ruler on the center mark of the paper, and I'm going to mark the 0 and the 7. I could do this another way. I could measure 3.5 this way and 3.5 this way. I could, count the measurements in a different way. But I am going to count these off of 0 and 7. Okay, so I'm going to find 2 other marks. I'm going to go to the top and the bottom of this. So I want to find 4.5 here and 4.5 here. Okay, and then I'm able to line up these 3 marks. I'm actually going to do it in this direction. And now I have a center line going horizontally across the page. I'm going to do the same thing in this direction. So I'm going to go up to the 6 above my center line. I'm going to go to the 6 below my center line. I'm going to line up all of these center tick marks that I've made. And now I'm going to measure off of this. Again, 3.5 at the top. So I'm going to mark the 7 and the 0. And down here, the 7 and the 0. Okay, so now I have 7 going across this way. Okay, hopefully I'm high enough that you can see. Okay, I'm going to go this way because I can see a little bit better without lifting up my paper. Okay, and then I'm going to line these marks up. Okay, so now I need to make some marks going this way. 7 and 7. Okay, so I'm going to line these up. Okay, and then I'm going to line these bottom ones up. Okay, and now I have a 7-inch square that's centered on my piece of paper, and I can, well, I'm gonna knock these down a little bit because I don't want to fight with these lines. And I want it to be nice and neat around the edge. And I'm gonna let these tick marks go. So now I can compare these two images. I've got a 7-inch and a 7-inch. And if I want to overlap this a little bit, that's fine. And that way I can do what I do with the other box exercise, and I can line up like this. So you do what's comfortable for you. Okay, so we want to start to measure off of the edge to find how much space is this horse taking up inside of the square. And again, this square is a little bit simplified. The advantage that Leonardo had when he was actually drawing this is that he could draw it anywhere on the page. We're going to learn from him by copying him exactly. So we're going back in the other direction, and we're going to measure in order to find where he placed his horse. I'm going to start closest to the edge that I can find. So I'm looking for a mark that's close to the ending point of this square so that I don't have to measure very far, and I start with a mark that then I can keep going after. So I have an area over here that actually touches the page. He ran out of paper here. This is the edge of the page, and you can see the way he's making his marks. It seems like, you know, maybe he's like filling in, or the piece of paper was lost. Okay, so we're gonna come down just a little bit, and I wanna know how far over I am. So I'm gonna judge that the ears start right about here. Okay, and then his snout comes pretty close to the edge of the paper, so I'm gonna measure that also. I can think about it this way. The idea is that we're visually trying to make judgments. We're trying to train our eye. I can get out a ruler and I can measure all of this, but what I really want to develop the skill of is being able to make visual judgments about this. So we're going to try to do this visually. So then I look at the center here, which is where the top of the horse is, and I want to look at this in comparison to where I just put his nose. Okay, so he's a little bit, this part that depresses the most is going to be a little bit to the left. Okay, and then here, this is about the quarter mark. I want to see where is that hitting, and I can try to make this line here. Let's see. Okay, I've got the ear here, so maybe I'm not quite far down enough. And if I need to, I can measure some more points. I'm making a very conservative line. I don't want to use a lot of pressure here because I want to be able to correct. I actually, as I'm drawing this, I think this might not be quite what I want. So I want to be able to correct myself. So this brings me over to this tail, which I think I made a mark through here. It looks like I have a mark. Okay, and then this is going to come down here. And I'm passing through this halfway mark. I have a little bit of a shadow of that intersection line, construction line that I made. Okay, his hoof is coming up to here. Okay, and then I have this descriptive line that goes into his body. So I'm going to try to match that all up. And you can see he does this really interesting thing that creates this motion, but I think he's just correcting himself. How far is the leg of the horse extended back behind his body? So we can see that here's where a leg like width would be, but then it's changed a couple of times. He thought about putting it here. It's kind of interesting to think about what Leonardo was making decisions in order to accomplish as he was making this drawing. Okay, so I think I kind of have that laid out. And then I want to think about this width. I can think about where does this come in relationship to the lower part of the horse. And I'm pretty close to the center here. Okay, and then I'm thinking about like the width of this thigh. And then here's some negative space that I can think about making a contour of. Okay, the tip of this hoof is only slightly below the tip of this hoof. And I have this kind of teardrop shape right here. I'm gonna try to imitate all this. And this is beautiful. He's chosen the way that hoof is pointed down is a really elegant angle, really beautiful thing. And he's chosen that specifically because he's making this monumental sculpture eventually, and he's trying to explore what's the most beautiful position a horse can be in. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at these muscles in relationship to what I already have. Let's see, I guess I need to make this face. So I've got this kind of semicircular line for his jaw. And again, this is where his nose is going to end. Out a little bit, and then I've got this teardrop shape again. There's some echo here in terms of where the muscles or the shape of the muscles echo each other a little bit. Part of that's the horse, part of that is Leonardo making decisions about what he's putting in here. Okay, so he doesn't quite finish. This comes down lower than this, so the front hoof is actually lower than the back hoof. And I think this chest is a little broader than what I have here. Okay, I want to check my proportions before I start to worry about copying his lines, because I need a boundary. I can't think about where the horse is and where the horse pieces are in proportion to each other and copy Leonardo's lines at the same time. That is too much to hold in my head and observe at one time. So I want to kind of make some boundaries here for myself so that when I'm copying his lines, I know where to start and stop. I'm not sure about this face. So I'm going to get this a little bit closer. Okay, maybe that's not too bad. Okay, so I have the basic structure of the horse, which gives me a boundary of where to draw. Now I want to think about copying his actual lines. I'm going to go to a B pencil. My pencils are a little bit out of order, but let's see. Actually, I'm going to go to, let's do a 3B, because the way these appear, they look kind of dark. My 3B is already sharp. And I want to think about like how thin and thick these lines are. Try to imitate it as best I can. And again, Da Vinci's using a different medium than us. And so we're just doing our best to imitate the lines. And we want to capture some of that spontaneity and freshness that he has. And value is going to be an issue here in a way that it wasn't in that Delacroix drawing that we previously did. So he's got some dark areas. And then he's using shading here. So I've got 1, 2 lines here. Okay. And silver point is very light. So I think that's why he made so many marks, to get it to show up on the paper. But we're going to try to imitate his marks here. So he's got some linear shading here. Linear shading is when we've got lines in the way that something's being shaded or made dark. So he's got dark and light here, which is showing us the dimension or roundness of the horse's muscles. And the direction of line that he's choosing is also showing us the shape of the muscles of the horse. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 little sections here. Okay. So this kind of comes, this might need to be wider. So this kind of comes to this like diamond point here. And then this comes around. Yeah, I think it's higher than what I have it. And even though I'm using a 2B, I'm not using a lot of pressure, because I can gradually build this drawing. And as I decide to make things a little more committed, I can also make them darker. Okay. So then I'm looking at this kind of triangular fingery line here. And where is this in comparison to this? So I've got this down here, and then I've got this line in the middle right here. And this is like his skin kind of wrinkling, I think, on the back here. I don't spend a lot of time around horses, but if you did, that would make this drawing exercise more interesting. Okay, so I have kind of a mass here of dark lines, and then they come up here, and this shows us a hint of a mane. And you can tell that he's thinking about how is this going to look in bronze. So if he has a lot of hairs, or a lot of individual pieces of mane. That's going to change the complication for him as a sculptor. And also, he's got to think about structurally, how is he going to accomplish casting something in bronze that's delicate. So he's avoiding a little bit making, you know, streaming locks behind this horse, probably because of making a study for a sculpture. Okay, I don't want to get into the face yet. I'm going to try to establish some more of these other things first. So he's using linear shading here to describe the contour edge of this muscle. And then we've got a dark spot here. I'm going to sharpen my pencil. Okay, I'm looking over here where the marks are. 2, 3. This line curls down around. And again, I'm sure he's thinking about how can we sculpt this hair that this horse is going to have. Okay, so this is cross contour when we have the shape of something described by the direction of the shading. And then here we've got some dark areas again. And it's starting to look a little bit more like Leonardo's drawing. I want to constantly make a comparison between these two. So I've got several sets of lines over here that all echo each other because he keeps repositioning where this horse's leg extends. And he never quite decides where it's going to end up. It gives us a sense of motion that's quite beautiful in a drawing, regardless of how difficult it would be to capture this in a sculpture. Okay, I'm a little bit off from the line that I made originally, so I'm going to go back up. from studying this drawing, we can kind of tell where he hesitated, where he found a line of the horse that he really enjoyed. There are some areas here that he studied a little bit, like the one that I'm currently working on. And he seemed to change things. But then there are some lines, like over here, where he just was really confident knowing where he wanted the lines to go. So it's kind of interesting. All right, so we're going to use some linear shading over here. To build this up, because this dark part pushes back. Okay, and then got some ghost lines here that are kind of interesting. He kept changing his mind. Okay, and really lately, I'm actually going to switch to, let me go back to an HB for some of these lines that are really light. These shading lines also contribute to the motion of the piece. Because they just add some movement to the way your eye moves across the painting, or the drawing. Okay, I think I'm going to go back to my 3B. I might have to go back in here with a darker pencil. I change direction a little bit here in some of these areas that aren't so strongly linear. I can get a little bit more depth of texture, like a softer texture. Leonardo seems to be doing that here. Okay, his shoulder is shaded a little bit. Okay, there's a muscle line that goes through here. And I'm constantly looking at the relationship between what I already have on the paper and what I'm currently working on, and I want to always keep checking the relationships of everything. Okay, so I'm gonna curl up this set of lines right here on the front leg. And you can see this like three-dimensional quality because you've got a difference in value between here and here and here. And this is a little bit of a zigzag line like we saw in Delacroix. Okay. Really gently gonna recreate these lines. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now I'm going to tackle the face, and then I'm going to go back in with a little bit darker pencil to get some of this real darkness that we see. Okay, let me sharpen my pencil. So I laid these lines in. I guess they're pretty accurate. I want to look at the eye. That's really central. I can put these closer together. Lines that go across his face to help define some of the muscles. Okay. I think this needs to move over. We got this hook line right here. He's simplified this line, so he's drafting. He's showing, like, here's the basic shape of where everything's going to go, and then he's going in just like we are and putting more detail. Okay, there's a little bit of shading here. I could do that with a lighter pencil. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay. And then some shading that comes down here. And as I get lines in here, I see more things. Okay. Okay, I'm getting pretty close. I want to go to a darker pencil. I'm going to go to a 5B, which I need to sharpen. darker areas really push in as my final edit here to copy Leonardo. Okay, I want to follow this properly. So here's my sort of diamond shaped mass of shade here. And I want to make sure that I'm looking at this one that comes down as I'm doing this next part. And these kind of have this softer texture. So if I change the direction of the line, that's going to help me with that. Okay. And then here, got a really dark spot here. I'm thinking about where are my darkest darks. That's what I'm going to use this 5B pencil for. And I'm going to push those a little bit. Okay, this line back here is dark. It's a little bit of a feathery sketch line. This helps unite, this darkness helps unite the back of the horse with the front. And same with this bottom area. I need this to be a little bit darker, so we can unite these two halves of the horse. And as I'm making a dark mark, I'm looking, where else is there a dark mark that I need to balance this whole thing in the same way the artist did. Okay. There is a little bit of a challenge to drawing from these old drawings because the paper's faded and the materials sometimes bleed a little bit. And I don't want to be tempted to change the lines. I want to copy them as much as I can. Okay, so here's one that I missed, like if you were standing still. See, we've got like mold or something there. That's making a dark spot that's not related to what's been drawn. So I'm going to ignore that. And then this is dark right here. Okay. I see some marks here. Okay, and I have copied this horse, and I have studied a little bit about what Da Vinci might have been thinking or might have been exploring in this study for his monumental sculpture that never got built. And I feel like I've learned something, and I've practiced the skill of measuring and creating something in proportion. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys next time.